What would you say to young women in the professional environment today who feel some pressure still to succeed?
You're enough. Just as you are, just where you are enough. If you leave with nothing today, just you are enough, you're powerful, you can do whatever it is you want to do. And if you have that mindset, you just keep yourself on a journey that's self-fulfilling.
Joining me today is former Justice Eva Guzman, a dear friend of mine. She is a mother, a wife, former Justice of the Texas Supreme Court, former Justice of the Court of Appeals, former trial court judge. She is currently an appellate advocate. She is a lawyer. And what other words do we have? She's a sister.
I am.
And did I say mom? I think I led with that one. A mom of a lawyer. And most recently, a inductee of the Women's Hall of Fame.
Indeed.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
She has navigated a career defined by firsts, and she's made some bold moves and a career defined by public service. So I am super thrilled to have her join me today for an interview to talk about women in the law. So I'm just going to dive right in.
Okay. Let's do this.
All right. So tell me about a moment in your career when you questioned your path and you wondered if it was worth it all and if you could keep going.
Gosh, every day. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. If we define the path as the practice of law, my journey on the bench, there really hasn't ever been a moment where I'm questioning, should I be a lawyer? Should I have served as long as I did? I was so happy to get out of the hood, so to speak, because I grew up in a very working class family in an inner city neighborhood where my peers really didn't go to college and they certainly didn't have these big dreams. So there's never been that moment. But along the way, there have been moments that are very disappointing and gut-wrenching, and times where I really didn't want to just get out of bed and do it again.
One of the things I love about you is that as long as I've known you, you have always been so authentic. And I love that you admit that there are times when you couldn't get out of bed. Can you tell us about those times? Because when we see you, you're always Eva. We see you as the woman who's always put together and who's always got it together. But we all have those moments where we can't get out of bed. So I'd love to hear more about that from your perspective.
Well, and I think that's what defines us, is how we respond and how we just get up. And I remember when we had tragedy in our family, and it really was just the most tragic loss in the most tragic way. And I was in law school, and I did think about, I'm not going back. And I had a professor who I'm older and he's gone now, but he pulled me aside and he said, you have to keep going and you have to get up, and you literally and metaphorically get up. And so that was the first time when I really felt like I don't know how to go on, this is just too much. And yet I took some time, I processed, I surrounded myself by people who loved me. And I will say that if someone doesn't really like you or love you or isn't good to you, just get away, whether they're a friend or, just find new ones. Don't be there. But we all have those moments, but it's how we respond. And that response is going to look different at every phase of your life.
Yeah. So you've made some kind of bold transitions in your life. You've gone from private practice to the trial court bench, to the appellate bench, to the Supreme Court, to a run for AG, and then back to private practice. Can you talk us through what your internal process was behind making the decision to make each of those bold moves? I mean, at least this last one that you made was a really bold step out there.
Yeah, that was because it changed, sort of the trajectory of what I had seen as a really wonderful, unique, fulfilling role, which is a Supreme Court justice. I mean, truthfully, it doesn't get much better than that. But there's also this stop dreaming and start doing. And my dream had been to serve in statewide office in a policy role. Judges can't do much. Hello, Chief Justice, how are you? And Chief Justice Thomas, it's so good to have you both here. Judges, you can't say much, you can't do much. So I'd always thought about a role where I could shape policy and work on real issues, not these trumped up political issues. One of the things that has sort of been with me since I made that first move was, how when you are trying a case, it's who, what, where, when, why, got to get it out there, right? And so one of the first things I thought about was, who are you doing this for? You're leaving a position where you've earned your respect, because I'm also one of those, you got to earn it. Don't give it to me, let me earn it. Who are you doing this for? And I knew that I was doing it not just for myself, but for all my daughter and the young women that would follow and would one day say, just get up and stop dreaming and just do it. And then the next question is, what is it that I think I'm doing, right? I'm taking on an incumbent. And, you have your own opinions about him, I have mine. But I'm taking on this incumbent, what am I doing? But I knew what I was doing because I'd been very deliberate in my thought process. This is what I'm giving up, this is what I could gain, and this is my worst case scenario, right? And where am I going? Well, when I became a family law trial court judge, there was no stopping me. I knew I was going to be on the Texas Supreme Court. Like, I made up my mind during the interview. And so I knew where I wanted to go. And someday I dreamed about being the governor of the state of Texas, right? This was my dream. And, I hope one of you fulfills it for me and gets out there and does this. But so that's where I ultimately wanted to go. And then the question is when. I feel like I should have done it 5 years earlier. And don't wait too long.
Yeah.
Because now I'm at a place in my life where I don't know that I want to take all that on again. So don't wait too long. If you've got aspirations, whatever they are, retire early, run for office, whatever it is that you're thinking about. And then the next question is just why? Why do I want this so bad? And it's okay if it's just selfish, but hopefully there's a more altruistic, something motivating you that's about more than yourself.
Well, not to get off track, I've got plenty of other questions. I can just say we've got 1,700 members of our group that are all Eva fans with whatever you decide you're going to do right now. Moving on. Just saying.
We'll see.
Just laying that out there. So even though with this last race, the outcome wasn't obviously what any of us wanted it to be, but what do you think you learned from making that bold move to step out there and take on the incumbent, and then it wasn't what you hoped it would be, but do you think you learned anything from that?
Lots of lessons, oh boy. But I think one of the primary lessons is, no matter what you're doing, there's got to be a place where you say, no Máss. I'm not making that commercial. I don't want to. It's uncomfortable. I don't want to. And it doesn't matter, what billionaire is insisting there's got to be a place, no matter what you're doing, where you say no mas. So I did learn that. And then you have to, and I know this, and you know this, but always anticipate your opponent's next move, whether it's in the courtroom or in politics. And we did not have the time or the money. I'd spent over $10 million on this race, and we did not have the time or the money to respond to that final ad, which was, I mean, look, maybe you saw it. Eva Guzman is a racist. Seriously, like seriously. But enough people, I don't think they bought it. I think they were like, wait a minute, what should we do? Yeah. And so always anticipate that last minute, like, onslaught that's going to come, and plan for that in the beginning. So we should maybe have said, let's save $3 million, because if they run a false ad the weekend before the general election when you're leading in the polls, for a runoff spot, don't get me wrong, it wasn't for like the victory, but I would have won. Always anticipate in the beginning what that move is going to look like and how you're going to respond.
I would extrapolate that to like a life lesson, right? Of like always save something back to anticipate that final move, right? Like the final jury argument, and save something for rebuttal, or
right.
The final rebuttal witness and the cross-examination, or that final kind of life lesson thing. That's a good lesson to learn. Was there anything about reinvention that you learned from returning to private practice after having been a judge for so long?
Yes, and you're going to reinvent yourself at different times in your life, whether you ever enter public service or not. There's going to be an experience in the courtroom, in your personal life, physically, that's going to change you. And the question is, what's your, how are you going to approach this reinvention, right?
Yeah.
And for me, the first thing was humility. Understanding, and I think I always did that as a judge. People ask me, well, do you miss all the lawyers, sort of like, all of this, praise? And I said, no, because I always understood that I represented the rule of law, and it was never about me.
Right.
Like, no, I'm not so great. There are 100,000 lawyers in the state of Texas that are fabulous, and so I knew what I represented. But I think that when you set about reinventing yourself, start asking yourself some questions. Why? Always why. Begin with why. Where's my support system going? Am I going to start all over with no one? No. Where's my support going to come from? And then what if I fail? Then what? And so I went through that. I right after I left the AG's office, there you go, prophecy. No, right after I left the Supreme Court, I joined a law firm in Houston, and the co-managing partner had been one of my mentees. And the other partner that I was close to was one of my law school friends that I served on the Supreme Court of Texas with. And so that was a natural fit. But then they were a tax firm, not an appellate firm. Yeah. So after I lost the AG race, it's, okay, what do I do now? And I could have stayed there. They wanted me. But I had lunch with a lawyer who'd worked for us on the Court of Appeals. And she was now a named partner in this law firm, and so was her other partner. And I saw this law firm as the right fit. It's an appellate boutique. This is what they do. And so that was the right fit for me. And here we are.
Yeah, and you've been doing great.
I'm trying.
Which of your moves have been the hardest for you? Going from private practice to first being a judge, your last one, leaving the bench, which one along the way?
So I went from private practice to being a judge before some of you were born, probably in 1999. And that was hard because I wasn't, like, I was just saying to someone, there's always been these in crowds in family law, right? Like the in lawyers, like you, like the it lawyers. Well, that wasn't me. And I was a smart, hardworking lawyer. I was a young mom, and I had friends, but I wasn't the popular kid. And so when I got on the bench, everybody was testing me. But I knew what I knew, and I knew that I was ready. And so that was tough that first year while, people are testing you. And I had a wonderful associate judge. By the way, I've never been one to be a proponent of coming in and kind of cleaning house, right? You come in and you work with folks and you evaluate their strengths. I mean, obviously, if someone was screaming obscenities about you during the campaign, then you probably don't want to keep them. But that's always also been one of the things that I think has worked, is getting to know people, getting to know their strengths, understanding their loyalties, and then making changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was hard. And then leaving the Supreme Court, obviously, that's really a great gig, by the way.
Politics is so divisive right now that, there's the left and the right and whatever, but judges have to remain neutral. How hard was it as you were running for justice or in any of the political campaigns? How hard was it to kind of balance this divisiveness of politics, but the neutrality of being a judge?
We are in a different place now. I ran 7 elections, I think, for the bench, because I would get appointed. I was appointed by Governor Perry to the Court of Appeals, and then I had to run immediately. Governor Bush to the trial court, then I had to run immediately. For me, it wasn't that hard to check my politics at the door. And I always ask myself this question: if you were the litigant, would you want a judge like you deciding your case? And and I really asked myself that, and as long as I could answer yes, if I had a real problem, would I want Eva Guzman to be my judge? And I could always answer that question yes. And so but judges have to work at that. There are a lot of forces pulling at judges. They run for office, there's all these groups, now there's blogs, now there's
social media
attacks on the independence of the judiciary. So I think I kept it in check. I also feel for the lawyers. Now that I'm back on this side of the bench, people run for office and, they'll call, oh, should I run? Well, I always encourage everybody to stop dreaming and doing, but then sometimes that means they're running against someone you really like and respect. And I think lawyers have a harder time, and then, they're fundraising and you want to be supportive, but then, it's a real issue.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think that women have a harder time going into politics because of the perception of a desire for power and being penalized for their ambitions?
Yes, I think you've seen that in recent elections with women who decided, everything was fine as long as I was Justice Eva Guzman running for the Supreme Court. But God forbid I tried to enter the other arena. I had so much support from so many people across the state, and yet there were some people who just didn't support that. Well, you're a great justice. Why would you want to do this? So I do think it's harder for women, but that makes us stronger, and it makes us better. It fosters sort of this grit and this tenacity and this spirit that it just comes out in you when you're in those situations. And it even happens in the courtroom. Yeah. And, I remember when I was practicing, and no one, I don't think, would say this anymore, but I walked into the courtroom and I was like so cute with my little blue dress. And so the male judge goes, well, don't you little ladies get prettier and prettier every day? And I mean, what do you do with that? And then just recently, I was in the courtroom and the opposing counsel tried to bear hug me in front of the judge. Okay, I'm not used to that. What do you do with that?
What did you do with that?
So then I don't know. So I just kind of
what do you recommend we do with that?
I kind of I pushed back a little bit, but then I asked my law partners, what do you do with men who, even at my age, still want to hug you? No. Side hugs, they said. Hey, yeah, side hug. Or you could just flat out say, hey, don't touch me, which is what I really wanted to say, but I didn't. So.
But, and this isn't a question on my list, but I mean, isn't that one of the problems that we have, you know, is that, you know, there's still that, oh, we have to be nice and not say, don't touch me. We have to be nice and put up with the hug, even though they wouldn't hug. My standard is always, would you hug the rock? If the rock was standing here, would the dude hug the rock? No. Then they shouldn't hug you or me. But you have to somehow feel this pressure, social pressure to be nice.
You do, because if, as women, you know, there's always this word that they use to describe strong women. Now, if we weren't in front of the judge, I probably would have said, hey, I'm not comfortable with that. But we were like in the courtroom with 60 people in front of the bench. That's just weird.
Yeah. I mean, my personal approach to that is to just be such a strong woman, that other word you were going to use. I just try to be such a strong woman they don't want to hug me.
No, and let's not confuse it. It was a power play. I had just rattled off all this case law, and the judge was nodding his head, and it was just, hey, judge, you know, don't listen to that. I know she was on the Supreme Court and she wrote that case, but don't listen to that. So, I mean, the best I could do that day is just kind of push him away and just say, like,
yeah, but that's the thing. I mean, it is a power play. It was a power play to make you seem or feel or look subservient.
Or something. Anyway, so it is tougher for women, but like I said, it makes us stronger. Like, don't do that again, because you're going to get a different response.
Yeah. And I think that as women, to the extent that we have influence over our sons or our husbands or men in our life, you know, that we also have somewhat of an obligation to teach them better.
Isn't that like kindergarten? Keep your hands off each other. Like, I mean, it's basic stuff here.
I hope. Have you seen the profession improve on that over your career?
Oh, for sure. You know, this room is just a testament to where we are and how strong we are. And I think the secret and the key to that is to support each other. And look, not everyone is on your team. And there will be some people, it doesn't matter how hard you try or how nice you think you are, they are never going to like you, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But for the most part, be the one that, as we've said before, straightens someone's crown. Like, don't be the one that, you know, kicks it. Be the one, because when we do that, we continue to build this profession that encourages and empowers and inspires, and that a place where we can turn to each other.
Yeah. You know, whenever I was a very, very young lawyer, fresh out of law school, I remember I had a judge that I practiced in front of. I was there for a hearing, and he was a very old judge at the time, and that was 30-something years ago. And he would kiss on the lips all the women lawyers.
Gross.
I know.
Gross.
I know. And it was always a dilemma of, what do you do about that? You know, back then, 30 years ago, back then, you know, what do you do about it? Because you either are the, as you said, the strong woman, who, the feminist, 30 years ago, feminists were a bad word, you know, who, you know, rebuffed that, or you had to think about your client and the result you were trying to get in the courtroom. And it was always a dilemma. And thankfully, he retired shortly after, you know, I started practicing. And now, you know, the advancements in our profession, you know, now that would never, ever happen, thankfully.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's what I see as definitely an improvement in our profession. But to me, that's kind of such a no-brainer.
You would think. But even back then, even 30 years ago, that should have been a no-brainer.
You would think.
Yeah,
you would think. So your daughter is now a lawyer.
Yes.
And where does she practice?
I'll tell you a story about Melanie. when I was on the family bench, I would drop her off at school, and I was always on the bench by probably 8:45-ish, but that was tough because we lived in the suburbs. And so sometimes we had no time for breakfast. So one morning, there's this custody case, and it's one of the IT lawyers and the other IT lawyer, and, the two parents, and they're really both okay, but the male IT lawyer says, and he's been feeding her Pop-Tarts for breakfast. And I'm sitting there, well, we ate it in the car today, but we had the Pop-Tart in the car. She turned out okay. She went to Harvard and then Duke Law, and hey,
Yeah.
we working moms do,
Yeah,
what we can.
The Pop-Tarts didn't hurt.
Did not hurt at all. But
what do you hope that women of her generation, women lawyers of her generation, experience differently than what women of our generation have experienced in the law?
I want them to be treated as just lawyers, not this focus. And it's still, she's in litigation, and you guys are too. You still see this. And so what I'm hoping is that through continued focus on why it's wrong to say to a woman, why are you so angry? And then men can carry on in these depots. So I do hope that we get to that place, and that all of you in this room who are just starting these journeys, don't have to endure that. And then my second sort of goal is always to, you're enough. Just as you are, just where you are enough. Because so many times we have it's called imposter syndrome. Maybe it's just self-doubt. And there are some people who really aren't enough, but they'll always feel like they are. That's not me. I always felt like, do I belong? But we need to keep telling ourselves, I am enough, and I am powerful, and I can change it. And if you leave with nothing today, just you are enough, you're powerful, you can do whatever it is you want to do. And if you have that mindset, you just keep yourself on a journey that's self-fulfilling.
I think that's such an important message, whether you're a lawyer or not. I think as women, just in general, and I think professional women, whether we have it harder to understand that or not, I think as professional women, it's maybe just harder because we're expected to know we're enough, but we all have that same self-doubt. Mm-hmm. And we just have to, fake it almost and pretend like we don't have the self-doubt, but we do. And for me, watching you up on the Supreme Court bench, it's real easy to think you don't have that self-doubt, but we all have it. And I'm sure that people perceive me the same way, like, oh, that's Michelle. She doesn't have any self-doubt. Of course I have self-doubt, Yeah. And I think that, knowing that we all have it, but how do you, what do you do to combat your own self-doubt?
So not only tell yourself you're enough, but do what it's going to take to make you feel comfortable. My first day on the Supreme Court of Texas, I guess back then they had legal pads. Nobody uses that anymore. Everybody's on the computer, right? Nobody uses legal pads.
I still use them.
I have them, but I know y'all don't. Y'all are in the computer. But, I had this legal pad, and I had to write myself, this note, you belong. Because I remember walking in with the other justices, like the Nathan Hecht, and all of these people that I didn't feel we were the same, right? Y'all are here, and I'm here. And I remember walking in and just going, wow, you're here. This is so cool.
Yeah.
But over the years, I got really comfortable, and I just worked really hard. And I came to conference prepared. And at the Supreme Court, even though our law clerks are in the room, they don't speak. It's up to you to present your case and to argue and advocate for other cases that you want granted. And apparently I was very good at that, I guess. But I got there to that place, but that's not where I started.
I like that. I think one of the things that I do that, is kind of like a fake it till you make it. But my mama always taught me, and this is a Tracyism too, but my mama always taught me to dress up, you know, dress better than the occasion so that you feel better than the occasion. And then I always try to take a deep breath. Just breathe it in, you know, and fill your lungs up. And that just helps, you know, like helps you stand taller and feel bigger. And I'm, you know, such a little munchkin that everybody always towers over me, and that makes me feel even a little smaller, you know. So breathing in kind of makes me feel a little bigger, and I kind of imagine that I'm like a hot air balloon kind of rising above it. So that's like my technique for trying to be enough, you know.
You know, I think the secret is just to prepare as much as you can.
Absolutely.
And your preparation won't look the same every day because life is there. But I was invited by the ABA to speak to a group of, again, the IT crowd, and I was following Justice Scalia, the late Justice Scalia.
Oof.
And
That's a tough one.
I practiced those remarks over and over and over, and they were very sort of intellectual, sort of, you know, because I was following Justice Scalia, and I just thought, okay, I've got to get up there and say something that sounds really great. But my husband, who's a retired police officer, knew the speech by the end because I had practiced. No, seriously, I had practiced. And so I think that comfort, and I got through it, you know, seamlessly, but just prepare as much as you can because that's going to give you the confidence and the comfort level. And if you're prepared, I always say not that much can go wrong.
Right. What do you think that likability and smiling has had? What effect has that had on you being able to deliver your message or being convincing in the Supreme Court? And do you think that that is a double standard for women?
Well, I think authenticity matters. People can see right through you. So I think you have to start from a place of authenticity. But it is true that for women, you know, being likable helps. I don't think anybody, you know, looks at a male advocate, and this is not a feminist, it's just reality. I don't think anybody looks at, you know, and occasionally says that guy's a jerk, right? But mostly men get to be themselves and they get to be the advocates that they are. But from women, you know, they want you to be a scholar and a great speaker and an intellectual. Oh, but also be very likable too, because otherwise, you know,
And smile.
we
Smile
may not
pretty,
be
young lady.
as receptive.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it helps. I mean, but don't feel pressured to smile. You know, I mean, do your thing, get up there, make those arguments, be serious in your approach, and then you may smile because you're happy with your delivery and your work on a case.
And what would you say to young women in the professional environment today who feel some pressure still to soften in order to succeed?
So for me, if you were arguing in front of me, I wouldn't soften. Like sometimes when women came in and I didn't know who they were so damn good sometimes that I'd go Google, okay, who was that? And, you know, what firm, you know, I knew what firm, but what are they known for? Who are they? Yeah. And so you want to be that person that, you know, the judge gets off the bench and goes to Google who you are. But there are some places where you may have to soften a little bit because you're in a certain part of the state, or even I mean, there are places in this state where I, even as a former Supreme, wouldn't wear pants to the courtroom because I think that I might be more helpful to my client if I'm wearing a skirt suit, right? So know your audience. It's like old advice that everybody tells you, but it's true.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I've always approached it is I'd rather get my message across than be offended about whether I'm wearing a skirt or pants.
And it's not about us. It's about the client.
Right.
I
want to win.
You want to win for your client. And so, okay, if I have to put up with this nonsense of wearing a skirt suit. Well, I am, because ultimately it's about my client.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, were I at liberty to say the hell?
Well, now I draw the line at kissing me on the lips, though, or
Yeah, well, no, for sure.
or frontal hug. I mean, I draw the
sure.
line with that. Okay, so your husband was a police officer. He's retired now. You had a daughter, and you've already kind of touched on this a little bit, but did your role as a very visible justice, did that ever kind of follow you home in a negative way?
I mean, the negative about that, and I do kind of looking back, is that it did take me out of my home more than I would have liked to be. I was a very visible justice. I was on a mission. I was going to get on the Supreme Court of Texas. They invited me to apply 3 times and told me no. You know, walked away, and talk about disappointing, and maybe I should never apply again. And the only reason I did is because my dear friend, a retired judge, was watching me walk across the street with and they used to do briefs in the past. And he called me and he said, Eva, if you're going to work that hard, you need to apply for the Supreme Court again. And I said, I don't want to. They've rejected me. It may have been 4 times. They've rejected me. And he said, well, you just haven't gone about it the right way. And so he was very helpful, had me meet with people I'd never met with before, donors and all this other. It's a big process. If you ever want to apply, call me. I was appointed 3 times, and I think I know a little bit about that. But it took me away from home. And you have this window with your kids, right? You have this window, because then they grow up, and sure, they love you and they're going to have dinner with you, and but they've moved on, as they should. And so you have this window. So I think I would have prioritized being at home a little bit more, because I did pay a price to get where I wanted to go with who I was and my background.
Yeah. Your husband had a career that had a safety component. Mm-hmm. You had a career that had somewhat of a safety component. Was there ever a time where both of y'all having these somewhat visibly unsafe careers was a concern for you? Like, did you sit at the court worrying about him being safe, and did he go to work worrying about you being safe?
I did in the beginning, when we were newlyweds, worry a lot about him, you know, being, he'd been a vice cop, all sorts of things at the Houston Police Department. And then this is why I really think when you have a law enforcement officer, it's about the entire family, because their wives, their children are living this life with them. But at some point, it's not that you get comfortable with it. It's that you realize that there's not much you can do to change. You know, I'm not going to. Eventually, when he almost got killed, I told him to retire, and that's why he retired young, because he literally walked in a room and there was a suspect with a gun pointed at him, and the suspect's mother convinced her son not to shoot the police officer, and so I said, that's it, we're done. And this was, you know, after decades in the police department, but I just knew that I couldn't control that, and so I prayed for him, and that was it.
Yeah. What do you think was the biggest price that you paid through your career?
Aside from the what I've talked about, and that's the time away from, we only have 1 child, right? The time away from home. I think it's that you lose a little bit of yourself in all of this, because you're Justice Eva Guzman, right? And you have a certain role, and you have to, you know, act a certain way and live a certain way. And like, I keep telling myself, darn it, if you're under 50, wear the bikini. Like, literally. Don't worry about it. And I just use that
I think if you're over 50, you should wear the bikini too.
Fine, but I won't
personally.
wear it now. But I mean, I say that as a metaphor, right? Because, yeah, do the stuff you want to do, and don't be so held back by norms and conventions, and it's your life, and just live it. And I would say that I did pay that price a little bit. Always worried about, is this going to be okay for me? Because someday I'm going to run for a different office, right?
Yeah. Did you ever feel lonely in leadership?
I think we all feel sort of lonely at different times for different reasons. Maybe you have a problem you just can't share with anyone, and so you're lonely. Or maybe you made a mistake somewhere along the way that you're also not comfortable sharing, and there's this loneliness that accompanies that. I have the same friends that I had before I got on the bench, and I've made a lot of new friends, but because I've always kept that core group close to me, I think that personal loneliness was never a big factor. And politically, yeah, sometimes you're on an island, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah. All right, final question. We never know how much time we have left, and if today were the final day, what would you want your legacy to be remembered as?
That's changed. I've been asked that question before, and that's changed. But I think I'd want it to be, she made a difference. She made a difference, whether it was in the lives of the children in the child welfare system, and I worked on those issues for many years, and I still care. The difference in the lives of law students who often reach out. I had a justice from another state call me and ask me if I would meet with a prospective law student, and I said, of course. So that, I think that's it, that I cared, that I made a difference, and obviously that on a personal level, the obvious thing is she was a good mom, wife.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.